common in Germany. So I didn't know, people used to sing it, and it was about a legend. And anyhow, they threw me in the back of a staff car and took me home, and right away I got put in my room, locked in. I had a lot of house arrest. And I heard outside, I heard my father screaming, I heard these women screaming. It was just bedlam. I didn't hear what they were saying. And finally it died down, and my father came into my room. I said, "What did I do? What did I do?" He said, "Of all the things available to you, you had to pick a poem written by a Jew." That was my crime. I didn't know he was a Jew. I love him to this day. He's a wonderful, wonderful poet. Heinrich Heine. If you ever find something of his, read it. It's wonderful. So now it's really started because everything was censored for me. Well, I only saw it for me at the time. It was beginning all over Germany, but in my household, everything was locked up. I could only read what I was given. Also, I got fantastically mixed signals, real great stuff. On the one hand, I was told, God gave you a brain, use it. And in the same breath, they tell me, don't think. Do as you're told. We are going to take care of everything. Keep your mouth shut. Don't ask any questions. And don't think. That's impossible. But if you knew they meant it, then there was punishment if you didn't. But you can imagine what happens to you. Everything is kept inside. And then around you, there were changes that seemed subtle, but they weren't that subtle. It really accelerated fairly fast. And there was, first of all, troops were marching in the streets day and night, swastikas hanging all over, from balcony, from buildings. The school, Hitler's picture was everywhere. I tell you what it does. You figure out yourself. Now, there would be a picture here, picture here, picture here, picture here. The whole school, the entrance a picture, and the principal's picture. I think the only place I don't remember a picture was in the bathroom. And we all had to come in and say hello. Every time you left the school, if you just went outside now for 10 minutes and came back, you had to say hello. Then worse than that, you had to address your friends. What's your name? Carol. You couldn't say hi, Carol. You had to say hello. Now picture Clinton here, Clinton here, Clinton there, Clinton there, Clinton everywhere. And you have to come in and say, Hal Clinton. You go to your teacher, you can't say Mr. Jones or Mr. Smith, you have to say Hal Clinton. Anything happens to your head, you're nothing anymore. You don't know who you are, where you are. And a couple of years ago, even some time ago, I couldn't sleep one night. And some people count sheep. I counted how many times I had to say Heil Hitler in a day. I got to 150 and I was asleep. I'm sure it was more. Even in some households, fortunately not in ours, you would have to come home and say to your parents, Heil Hitler. I went to a little candy store one day, 2 blocks from my home, 2 blocks. And that day I did not feel like saying Heil Hitler. I thought it was ridiculous and it's stupid. But you're not allowed to sing. But in my own way, I walked in and I said, hi. I was not going to say Heil Hitler. By the time I got home, I was reported. Now, nobody in my family explained to me why I couldn't do these things. I got house arrest. I think they locked me up so they were safe. I would say. But then other things happened in school. Classmates began to disappear. Teachers began to disappear. And at first, I remember one of my favorite teachers, I had him in Latin, and we had a big project coming up. Let's say it was on a Monday, and the project was on a Tuesday, and I was very excited. And I come in on Tuesday morning, I'll never forget it. He's not there. So I asked, where is he? Oh, well, he had a heart attack last night. Okay. No funeral, no nothing. He had a heart attack, and that was it. Well, first time you accept it, you have no choice. But all of a sudden, people are disappearing, and the explanation is they have heart attacks. We had an epidemic of heart attacks in Germany. Not the measles, not the chicken pox, heart attacks. And no questions, and you weren't even allowed to ask. They just disappeared. One of my best girlfriends disappeared. One day, she isn't there. Like you come in and your best girlfriend, I saw her yesterday, I talked to her last night. Where is she? Heart attack. Then you start to wonder. And after the war, I found out her mother was Jewish, her father was not. And they had given the usual order that either you divorce or get rid of the Jewish mother, or you're all going to the work camps. At this point, we only know about work camps. And the mother committed suicide, and the father and daughter disappeared anyhow. Nobody knows what happened. See, this is horrible when you just picture in your own mind people you see every day, you love, you're with, and they just disappear and you don't know where they went. It's a horrible feeling, I tell you. So all this started creeping in, and then it really started also to be paranoia, because slowly the paranoia starts. Because all of a sudden you become afraid of everybody. You cannot even talk to your best friend about your innermost thoughts because you're afraid they turn you in. Friend turned in friend, families turned even in their own children, and children turned in their parents. Neighbors and neighbors, teachers and teachers, the slightest amount of jealousy, because all you had to do, or you get mad at somebody for a moment, all you had to do is go to one of the, what they call blocklighters. They were from the Gestapo, but they were civilian and they were hidden. You really never knew exactly who was it. It's another great way to get paranoid. And all you had to go in and say, hey, he or she or our parents or whatever said something bad about Hitler. That's all. And you're gone. That's all. So, of course, I didn't understand that why I got so much house arrest later on. I figured it out. My family was, I put them in danger by trying to shoot my mouth up. Asking questions and thinking is shooting your mouth up. Strict obedience. I didn't like it. I tell you that. I thought sometimes I laughed and I got punished for laughing. What they took serious, and I thought it was nuts. I thought it was the only sane one, which turned out was pretty much right. They were all crazy. All right, and then we go on to, life got, for me, very difficult, because I could not follow. I was just not a follower. But I had to do it, and I was ornery, and the one thing that saved me, I think, were my love for dogs. I got 6 now. I had my dogs, and they were my psychiatrist. And I think that's what helped me. I talked to my dog. told him how much I hated Hitler, how much I hated this, how much I hated that, because I knew he couldn't tell anybody else. I was safe, but I got rid of it. Sad way to do it. Couldn't talk to I couldn't talk to my own sisters. Because, you know, like siblings have fights, and we had plenty of fights. I couldn't say anything because they might turn me in. Your mother can turn you in, your father can turn you in. You can turn in your father. If you get mad at your father or your mother, you can turn him in. Never see him again. Great society. So life was difficult, and then, of course, the war started. And that became very unsettling because we moved around and back and forth, and finally we settled again back in the town, and in 41, Britain had entered the war and the bombing started. And my hometown was laid 95% or 98% almost flat in 20 minutes. Now imagine plaster, and I mean when I say flat, it's flat. And you realize how much you depend on little landmarks that you take for granted. You don't look at every day, but when they're gone, I did not know where I was. Our house was sort of standing, no more windows, no more doors, but we had the walls. Most of them were rubble, nothing but rubble. Now you picture all your streets, nothing but rubble. And a leg sticking out here and an arm sticking out here. And you get outside and trying to walk through all this, you don't know where you are. In a town where you've lived, born, and grew up, and school was destroyed. I tried to find my school, no school. It's really something. So that's our great leader who got us into this. But at that point, you don't think about that. All you think, what is going on? It's crazy. And then my father, before I get into that, I did have the pleasure of meeting the great leader. Oh, I hated his guts. We had already we had the uniforms. We had to wear the little uniforms. I wasn't formally in the women's section of the Hitler Youth. But I was a little kid. But we had the uniforms. And Hitler would come around once in a while to inspect his little victims, I can only call them, and see if we were brainwashed sufficiently and so on. So he would come and visit the schools, and we had to line up, and somebody always had to give him a bunch of flowers. And that particular time I was elected because I was about 10 or 11, I forgot. I had my present height, skinny as a rail, but tall. So I'm sticking out everywhere. And so, of course, you know, the Super Ray is tall and blonde and all this stuff. And I was tall, and I was sort of blonde. I wasn't really wheat blonde. I was dishwater blonde, I guess you call it. But they gave me the flowers to give him. And I see him coming down. And very frankly, this guy was raunchy. And maybe that's why I became obsessed with the perfect specimen of the human being. He was ugly. He wasn't blonde. He didn't have blue eyes. Plus, I felt he was slovenly. His clothes didn't really fit right either. But anyhow, he's coming down, and somebody whips the flowers out of my hand last minute. Gives it to my girlfriend next to me, who was shorter, but very blonde. So I'm mad. I'm relieved on the one hand, and I'm real mad on the other hand. So afterwards I said, why did you rip the flowers out of my hand? It was one of the leaders. And she says, well, she has blue eyes and you have brown eyes. So something wrong with me there too. So I'm not the perfect Aryan. I don't have blue eyes. And they try and understand, and you can't. To this day, I can't understand it. And I don't expect you to understand it, but just go with it. So yeah, and I came nose to nose with him. I was slightly taller than he was already too, you know, so I felt I had an advantage. Yeah, And he patted me on the head. Oh, I hated being patted on the head. I mean, like, would you love your teacher to come up and say, nice going? And I saw his eyes, and they scared me to death. And that's when I really learned, too, the sensitivity of your eyes are really the mirror of your soul. You can tell when somebody's lying by looking straight at them. You can see more than people. This guy, his eyes were stone, steel. I just, like a cat, everything went up. I remember it so well, and I was scared. The guy scared me. Well, and then on we went, and the usual routine, except I was miserable in school because we didn't learn much anymore. I like to read. I like to learn. I like to be challenged. Now it all became Hitler and his cronies and Hitler and this and that. And physical fitness, which was overdone. I mean, I like sports, but come on. All the time, because we were supposed to be the perfect specimen. I mean, we ran more hurdles. And never to show emotions. I remember having to run hurdles with a broken foot. Hurt like hell, but you were not allowed to say it. You can't cry because you're inferior. You can't show any emotions. And that was tough for me because I'm an emotional person. I didn't like the sternness and the goose stepping. I hated it, you know. They stiff. They all walked around like they swallowed broomsticks, and it just got to me. So anyhow, the bombings increased, and life was getting very difficult. So my father moved us, like many families did, to get what we call now to stay one step ahead of the posse. And he moved us to Bavaria. Wonderful, wonderful little hamlet at the foothills of the Alps near Munich. And there I was it was great. Tiny little hamlet with a gorgeous lake. In Germany, that's the sadness, and the sadness will never leave me. It's really a beautiful, beautiful country. The Alps are magnificent there, and there's so many, and some people are very nice, but during that period, nothing was right. It was horrible. But down there was nice. We were hidden, and I tell you how small the village was. Well, first of all, we had more cows than people. And we had, most of the men were at war now. The war is in full swing. So it was mainly women and children. And we had one guy in the whole town. He was a farmer and the fisherman. We would get our fish, at least we got fish to eat because the lake was full of fish. And he would fish, and he would sell us the fish. But he was also the barber, the policeman, the fire chief, and the father confessor. He was everything. So we went to him all the time. Which brings me back to, he didn't have to go to war because he had 13 children. Which also brings me back to Hitler invented and instigated the Mother Cross. And that's really something. That scared me too, as a young female. If you had, let's see, I think it's from 5 to 7 children, you got the bronze. You got medals, like the Olympics. From 7 to 10, you get the silver. And over 10, you get the gold. So the fisherman's wife with 13 kids, they were poor poor, poor. The kids, I'll never forget it. They were always running around the village without any bottoms on. All they had is little shirts and nothing else. They were all running around, one every year. And she was poor. She had very little to wear. But by God, she wore that gold medal everywhere she went. She was so proud. Some society. And all I remember singing sometime, oh my God, if I ever become a mother, I've got to have 10 kids. I mean, I love kids, but I didn't want 10 to sport this thing. My mother forever complaining that she got the bronze because she only had 5. Anyhow, we were down in the village, and while we were there, and I loved it there because we went to school by boat, which was fun. That's the most fun I had. Because don't forget, in a society like that, you're not allowed to have a childhood. No childhood, no teenage years. By the time the war was over, we were 14. I was going on 80. We were old. We didn't know how to have fun. We didn't know. We were old. I'm making up for it now, though, I guarantee you. And so we went to school and had fun on the boat and what have you. And then at one point, they did come after me and got me, which means they got me into the Hitlerjugend, the female equivalent of it. And I was pulled into a camp which was deep in the mountains. Now we're getting higher into the Alps, and which turned out to be really an indoctrination camp. And during the day we had to do some physical work, which I didn't mind, for the peasants, because the men were gone. So whatever the season was, I think during the time that I was there was fall, because we had to get potatoes and stuff. That was fine. But then in the afternoon, again, exercise for your bodies. The bodies had to be perfect, and on and on and on. And we were about 25 girls in a log time setting, and 5 guards. 5 more missing links, I guarantee you. Terrible women. I don't know where they got them from. And in the evenings, we were lectured, indoctrinated like over and over and over. And mainly it was Hitler when he was born, his life, his achievement, and a lot of what we were fed were out and out lies. We didn't know it, but afterwards, they're just out and out lie. And I tell you how they lied. One of the biggest lies is we had to always sing this stupid song. It's a Nazi song. The lyrics are really stupid. And the guy who wrote it supposedly wrote it, was made into a martyr because he was one of the first street fighters who helped Hitler to power. And he was killed. So we were told he was killed in the name of Hitler because he fought for Hitler, and that's how he got killed. So he's a hero. And we had to revere this guy. Well, again, after the war, the guy was a pimp. And I tell you how he died. He got knifed on the sidewalk by one of the boyfriends of one of his girls. And that is our martyr. That is the national hero. Nice. And so the lies were everywhere. Lies, 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 lies. And so anyhow, every night, because this guy comes to mind, because we had to talk about him. Oh, this poor guy died for the great Führer. And so then they would pick us after the indoctrinations, one by one, and you would have to get up and repeat all this stuff because they're checking how much they indoctrinated you, that you got it. It's ingrained. And so it came my turn. I think I was there, I'm not quite sure, 3 or 4 weeks when my turn came. And I started. Again, it's like a smallish room, and you're again on a soapbox. And I lost it. I lost it bad. Everything had accumulated so badly, and I went berserk. I screamed and I I stomped my feet, bad scene. And I screamed and I said, you're talking now 1943, 44. And I screamed and I said, I am so sick and tired of Hitler. Can't we ever talk about something else? Well, immediately I was thrown into the dorm. Now that's in the evening. Now also, mind you, no telephones up there, no communication. It's hard to imagine now. No TV, no Walkmans, no nothing. I think for the whole group we had 2 bicycles. And I knew they couldn't do anything that night. But I was done in for sure the next morning. So I had to get away. And I desperate. So somebody said my scheme was getting very smart. It wasn't smart. It was total desperation. Because one thing came in, 2 things I knew. First of all, we all only had 1 pair of boots, which becomes important because in the Alps you don't go barefoot, I guarantee you. And secondly, I knew that the guards at night drank a lot of beer once we were supposed to be asleep. And you could hear it. They had their own little room. And the voices get louder and louder, and then they burp, and then they snore. And so I knew at what cutoff they were out. So I had a girlfriend at the time, and I told her, I said, look, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but go with me, because I was afraid to go alone. And she agreed, and I said, you stand by the door and just give me any sign. This is late at night. If you hear anything, just give me a hiss or something. And she said, okay. And I crawled on my belly, and this all came up at top, desperation. And I lined up all the shoes, which were under the bunk, and there the German perfection helped me, because we had to line up those shoes under the beds in the same spot, toe to toe. They could not be askew. So blindfolded, you can go in and get the stuff. So my belly, I got all the shoes together, got them into the meeting hall, and mixed them all up. And this was all very quick. Like you'd take a size 5 to a size 9, left to left, right to right, all mixed up, and tied the knots so tight on the laces, because I knew it would give me time to get out. And when I finished that, and piled them all up in a big pile, and dropped the uniforms, and put the jogging suits on, and out we went. And I knew, all I know is they're still there unscrambling those shoes, and they couldn't go barefoot, they couldn't come after us. And we were in the woods about 10 days to 2 weeks, making it back home. We couldn't go near the roads because we were afraid we were being followed. Anyhow, we made it home. And fortunately, now you're getting towards the end of the war, and fortunately, and don't misunderstand that, I'm saying fortunately my father was dying from cancer at the time. Because had he not died at natural death, they would have gotten him. Because he was outspoken a little bit too much. And at that point, Hitler hated the old officers. Because everything now was SS and up to that. The old school of officers, he did a lot of them in. And they tried to get rid of him, and too late. They should have done it earlier. They sat around and said, it'll never happen here. They could have stopped them, but they didn't. My father could have stopped them. So anyhow, I got home, and he was weak, and so I didn't catch hell from him either. He was glad to see me home. And the only thing, and we don't really know, is they did not come after me. And the only thing we can figure out is that they didn't want to admit to their superiors that they didn't pay attention and 2 little kids escaped, you know. But I don't know. But they did not come after me. And I was glad to be home. I couldn't take it anymore. I was getting very, very, very more and more nervous. And I went totally into myself. I was in the woods most of the time. And now Munich started to be bombed every single day and night. And you could see the bombers and you could see the mess. And it was just very difficult. And school had stopped. We have no more school because every time we got into school, the sirens would blow and you had to go down in the shelters. You were running back and forth into the shelters, so how can you conduct any life at all? So we just hung out, waiting for whatever's going to happen. And one day, we are going now 1945. Would you hand me my water, please? Because this is rough, and it's always tough. The end of 45. The end of 1945, April. And my mother said to me one evening, she said, in your town, first thing tomorrow morning, our boats, I should say, our boats had been cut to 2 instead of 4 because of lack of fuel, and food was short, and everything was going bonkers. And so there was only one boat at 7 and one at 9 in the evening. So she said, you catch a 7 o'clock boat because up in that town they're giving away free cheese. So get all the cheese you can get. Okay, we go. And again, my girlfriend, she was a real true friend, said, come with me, I don't want to go along. So she said, okay, I'll get cheese too, okay. So we go. It's 45 minutes across the lake, that's important. And so we get there 7:45. And the town is total disaster. A sea of people, a sea of uniforms, black limousines driving in very narrow streets again, you know. And so people had to split and single file, and it was just bedlam and loudspeakers all over the place. Hitler screaming, we are winning the war, give your last energy, your blood, your all these slogans, to the fatherland. And the SS was there. I was scared of those guys too because they were trigger happy. They were pulling their guns. They were all over the place. And you could hear the big guns in the west. You could hear the artillery. So you knew what was called the so-called enemy was closing in. So you hear all this. So here, and strangely enough, I didn't have to stand in line to get the cheese. Normally you had to stand in line for hours. But I didn't have to stand in line. So we were done like about 8:30 in the morning. And I, in this mess, and I looked at my girlfriend and I said, I cannot stay here till tonight. I'm going to walk it home because there's a road on the upper part of the lake where you could go. It's about 15, 20 miles. Sounds like a lot today, then it was nothing. I said, I'm going to walk it. I can't take it. So she said, okay. And it was drizzly, and she was behind me. I lost her in the end. And I never saw her again either. But anyhow, I had to go east for a while. And I had to go east for a while and then turn and go south because we were near Switzerland and Italy. And as I turned south, most incredible sight. To my right away, I saw little groups of people first mingling. But to my right, there was a girls' school, private girls' school, which was closed now, and there were big stone walls. And against that wall, well, the only way I can describe it, skeletons, human skeletons. And when you become skeletal, which I never realized, their eyes were so recessed that They were like holes. I'll never forget those eyes. And those hands were just bones, skin and bones. And they were crouched. They were in rags. They did not have the striped stuff on yet. They were in rags, and they couldn't get up. It was just incredible sight. And instinctively, I kneeled down and I started crawling towards them. Now the road's in my back. And I started to hand out the cheese. And I will never forget those hands. Just for those hands and those eyes, just for that little piece of cheese. And while I'm doing this, all of a sudden I feel this thing in my ribs, and I turn around, and there's the SS guy standing with his bayonet in my ribs. And he said, whatever you're giving these bastards, he said, stop or I'm going to make you join them. And he meant it. Plus he had the big German Shepherd, which were all killer dogs. They were trained to kill. And I just packed my backpack up and ran, started running. And as I'm running, there was a short hill, and then the landscape flattens out, and you can see the road snake for quite a few miles. It was incredible. Then I saw the columns. Like groups of 25 skeletons. And they had the striped suits on. And we had heard about the concentration camps, but we thought it was hard labor. And it was something you don't want to be, where you don't want to be. But we had no idea specifically what was going on. And you see these, and these people had clogs or rags on their feet, and they were shuffling. They couldn't walk. And each little group had an SS-man on the right and an SS-man on the left, both of them with the dogs and both of them with their guns. And I looked over in the ditch and I see a guy or a woman, you can't even tell, there was a skeleton in the ditch, and he had one knee cut off, and he was looking up in the sky, and I tried to help him up, and he was dead. I didn't realize he was dead. And nobody did anything. And so I kept walking along, edging, with the prisoners. And every time these big black SS limousines would come through, they would have to get into single file. And so it was a slow walk, and it's bewildering, and I was crying, and I was getting really messy by this point. And all of a sudden, behind me comes one of my classmates on a bicycle. And I still remember his name, Udo. And I said, oh my God, what's going on? And I was in a way glad to see him, because I was going to hop on the back of his bike and have him give me a ride. I said, what is going on? And he said, oh, Chris. He said, you are stupid. You've always been stupid, with a real arrogant SOB. That you are real stupid. So what, I'm stupid, I'm crying, I'm stupid. He said, they're cleaning out Dachau. They're taking them to the mountains. They already shot 20,000. They're going to shoot the rest. And he says they should have done it long ago. And he takes off. First of all, I don't know who they are. Not yet. They, who are they? Skeletons. So he takes off. So now I'm afraid of the prisoners, I'm afraid of the SS, I'm afraid of the dogs. I'm really in fine shape. And all of a sudden there comes a little supply truck from the regular Wehrmacht, which most of them were pretty good guys, and they didn't want the war either, and they were sick and tired of the war. And they were driving this little truck, but at like 5 miles an hour, maybe less, because of all the people. And he threw the door open, and he said to come in, and of course I did. And there were two of them. One was a driver, he was there, and I was sitting here on this. It becomes important, and he explained to me there. Oh, I had looked, there was a little window in the back, and I looked through that, because now I'm, And I said, what do you got back there? There was a top of it. And he said, oh, it's all a bunch of old, stale army bread. And we are going to dump it as soon as we can to make better time because we are getting out of here. We are going to Switzerland. And so what do you think all the others are doing? So they were all deserters. The SS was deserting. They did not want to get caught. And other than hearing the guns, I didn't realize how close the Americans were. And at this point, even, we were in such a close society, I didn't know whether the Russians or the Americans would get to us first. And we were all scared to death of the Russians. Also, the propaganda, of course, in Germany was unbelievable from the beginning to end. And when they stopped screaming about the Jews and the Catholics and what have you, then they started, well, the Americans are the barbarians. And we indoctrinated. The Americans are going to arrive, and they're going to line you all up against the wall, and they're going to rape all the women, and they're going to shoot you. Anyhow, when he said that, we're going to dump this bread, and I said, how dare you to dump this bread? I said, don't you see the hunger out here? And then my own naivete shocks me to this day, because I said to him, do you have a knife? These guys were armed to the teeth. Sure, I got a knife. So he pulls the knife and he starts scraping up some of the bread, but it was so hard. So I would put it in my hand and hold it out the right side window. Now this becomes important. Yes. Remember single file now, the prisoners? One prisoner way back saw me giving out something. And in order to reach it before the others, he threw himself. And about at least 10 of them just collapsed like dominoes, trying to get to that piece of bread. Which they probably couldn't eat anyway because it was so hard, but I couldn't see it. Anyhow, we got to the turnoff where I had to cut down towards the lake, and they were going in a southeasterly direction. And I got off, and I ran. I was 3 miles to home, and I ran that I had such cramps in my legs that I don't know how fast, because I was totally paranoid at this point. I thought behind every tree was an S-man who's going to jump out, or a prisoner who's going to jump out, and it was just incredible. Now, if I had a child who came home in the shape I was in, I'd say, wait a minute, something big is coming down here. You know what my mother said? This is how we were reduced. She said, where's the cheese? I said, I gave it to some very, very hungry people. Oh, you and your imagination. You are always making up stories. Sure, I had about 10 pounds of cheese. I ate it. I wouldn't be walking. I said, please, I begged her. I said, come up to the road with me. See what is going on up there. She refused. I'm making it all up. Because I was in shock for quite a while, I don't know. But I removed myself from everything. I just hoped to God it would all end and I was going to get out of there. Which I did. And not till we got back to our hometown again, and that was in the fall of '45, after the war's end. And we were under French occupation at this point, because we had the French, we had the Americans, and the British and the Russians. Not that we got back to this town, did my mother believe me? The French forced every citizen of our town to go and see the evidence which had been collected by now, and forced them to look at it. And my mother did. But came home, and it was never, ever to be discussed in our house. As long as you're under my roof, you keep your mouth shut, type of attitude. And to this day, I have one surviving sister in Germany. We're totally alienated. I saw her 10 years ago, and I could not talk to her. She almost threw me out of her house when I opened the subject. Of course, then the barbarians arrived, and on that note, this is how we were. A little jeep comes into the town. Yeah, I didn't know it was a little army. I don't know what a jeep meant then. And there are 2 Chinese in it. So I went to my mother and I said, the Russians aren't coming, the Americans aren't coming, the Chinese are coming. So she said, now I know you're off the wall. Chinese aren't coming. I said, look out, Chinese are here. Didn't know about Chinese Americans. We didn't know anything about America. There were Chinese Americans in the American Army. And here they're in their jeep. Now remember the SS and the goose stepping and the guns. Here 2 guys with their feet on the dashboard, packages of Lucky Strikes and Camel thrown all over the place, laying back, chewing gum. I didn't know what gum was. And blaring, you are my son. I said, those are the barbarians? After the SS? I said, that's where I'm going. I'm going with the barbarians. And I spoke a little bit of English, very badly, but from school, but I was to interpret some of the orders that had to be given. And we were sitting at the desk in the fire station, and one of the Chinese Americans hands me a stick of gum. Now, first of all, I don't know what gum is. I don't know what to do with it. Secondly, we were so paranoid that I was convinced he's going to poison me. So I tore it in half, and I handed him half. Real brilliant. He chews it first. If he doesn't drop dead, then I can eat the other half. But I also watched him how he did it. Well, when I came home after this, I walked into my house, and I think I practically gave my mother a heart attack because I was chewing gum and I was coming in. After all this, oh my God, I'm decadent now. I hope I didn't bore you, and we get to some questions and figure out why am I telling my story. Because it can happen here. Already beginning. Same thing they said in Germany, it can't happen here. It will never happen here. And everybody sat around and did absolutely nothing till it was far too late. And I think sometimes that the people who stood by and did nothing are just as guilty, or maybe even guiltier than the perpetrators. So you have to do something, and I think to see how the freedom we have here, how important it is. And never to, Hitler was basically a cult. They had some very strange rituals at midnight and so on. And they were mad. And look the price we paid, the great leader. We all ended up with nothing. Germany was in shambles. In a short time. 15 years. And this year I think it's even more important. I can't even believe I'm walking around 50 years later. It's a 50-year anniversary of it all being over. That's a long way away, don't you think? It comes faster than you think. Make the best of it. Okay, any question? Well, you're locked in your room. We had the old-fashioned keyholes, of course. You were not allowed to eat with the family. You could not communicate with your friends. You were taken to school and picked up from school, so you could not socialize with anybody. And depending on what they felt the offense was. It could be 1 day, or the longest I ever got was a week. But after a while, I enjoyed it, believe it or not. I enjoyed house arrest because I was away from all the nuts. I invented all kinds of games in my room and diddled and dawdled and talked to myself a lot. Yeah, I was house arrest. In Germany? Everywhere. Oh, I'm terribly disturbed about, we have seen it now with Oklahoma. We see the red flags going up. That's why it's even more important to speak about it. 10 years ago, I started to talk. We couldn't talk before that. It was so painful. But once I started to talk, I warned. We saw signs already then in this country. And it was the same frustrations that I had in Germany, because everybody started to say, oh, you're overreacting. Oh, these are only small little groups. In the meantime, you already were aware, I mean, it was public, that they already had a network between the American neo-Nazis and the German neo-Nazis. They were training some American groups over in Germany 10 years ago. These are not individual little groups that, like people said to me, even 8 years ago, 5 years ago, oh, they're just tiny little, oh, they're just a bunch of nuts. Yeah, And that they are more than nuts. That's how it started over there, and that's how it ended up, because it's the wages of violence. The hatred will beget violence. And the violence, once it's unstoppable, I'm surprised I'm alive. It is very bad, and I'm very much concerned here. And even so, we have to be so careful to preserve our freedom we have here. And that freedom of speech is terribly important. But there comes a cutoff point when the free speech is inciting to violence. No. And when you go around blowing up buildings, that's the beginning. Or all these supposed nuts who go on weekends and play with assault weapons because they have nothing better to do. Come on. All this, one second, just to finish my thought. Because all these wonderful groups, and don't believe what you hear when they say, oh, we are peace-loving, we are this, we are so religious, we are this. Well, if you're all those things, what the hell are you doing with assault weapons? Don't need any. So the minute you start building up an arsenal, you are up to absolutely no good, and that has to stop. And you have to stop it in the very beginning, because it grows, it grows. I remember even my dear husband, with whom I had an argument, he said, oh, Chris, there are only about 100 of them. I said, yeah. I said, they're growing. Now we are up to what? And they don't even know how many. But I think they know at least 10,000 or better now. But it's all over the country, so it's tough to estimate. Yes, sorry. Did you hear the question? How did I end up in the United States? Because, well, I left Germany in 1947 and went to Paris first. And there I really, truly, I worked hard and I was underground because as a German it was tough. I don't blame them. And then in Paris, I was there 5 years, and I met my first husband there. Not this one. And I married and came to America. And didn't go back till 10 years ago. I couldn't go back. And 10 years ago, well, 9 years ago, I went back to see my sister for the first time in all these years. It was a disaster, because not much had changed. Not much in the attitudes had changed. I would scream, if you don't learn from this. So she's still walking around and said, oh, if we only had won the war, things would be different. She's in West Germany. She has a wonderful life. She's rich as can be, tight as saving her pennies, having a wonderful time. She's complaining. But, and I looked at her, I said, if you only had won the war, are you stupid? And that was it. We got into it pretty bad. That was a big mistake, because I had 3 weeks. I spent 1 week in Paris and 2 weeks in Germany. I should have spent 2.5 weeks in Paris and 1 day in Germany. I was very depressed when I got back, when I left Germany. It's very much built up again, but the attitude is, I don't think much has changed at all. It's either they're getting neo-Nazis again, or they're the apathy. They're sitting around. No, nobody's doing anything. Nobody's. Any other questions? In the very beginning, very badly. But I understood it. And so I coped much better with it. It was difficult, because I tried to get through to take the human being, to take the individual, that the danger was, always in generalizing and grouping people. That's where the danger lies too. But the feelings were very, very bad, and can you blame them? The only way I could get some respect here and there, because they got mad, but I got most respect, was I said, if America had ended the war sooner, you should have come in sooner. And I raised the first question before, because also I said, now they're asking it all the time. I mean, I'm talking now. Oh God, 40 years ago. Yeah, I'm that old. 40 years ago, I would say, why didn't the Americans bomb the railroads to the concentration camps, to the extermination camps? It was easy. They were flying over them. They didn't want to bomb the camps themselves in order to save lives. Bombed the darn railroads, because it would have been very difficult at that time to rebuild them, because Germany didn't have the material. He blew it all in all his crazy wars. So that's how the Americans at first, when I came here, they didn't want to hear that either. But I enjoyed that I had the freedom of speaking out. So if you go on my back, I get on your back. That's how it started, and then we ended up with a lot of respect. To really, well, first of all, to listen and taking it seriously. I think that is the first, and that can only go through education or even person to person to get across this is not a joke. This is growing, that it is a serious thing. And then to change some laws drastically. Absolutely. I would, boy, I don't know. I hate the word banning, but I would not let these little groups, these satellite groups, run around with assault weapons. But of course that gets difficult, because then you say you don't have the free society. But if it's on a destructive path, which they're sitting there, they're scheming. This is the beginning. We're going to see more, I guarantee you. The powers that be, how do you reach them? That I really don't know. You can only try and hope that we do learn from history. And I bank on you guys, really. That's the main. It's because what kind of a world do you want? And it's up to you. My generation, we got our foot in the grave. You're going to be gone. It's you. I would not want my children to grow up this way, and I don't my grandchildren. No one. I wouldn't want any of you to see you in this. So you can start. And the minute you see hate, it's also combating the hate. Because even if it's just being sown like a little seed, the hate grows very quickly. And so you have to knock it immediately. When you hear anybody, you have to start with small areas. And if enough people do it, then we can, make a much better life. When you hear somebody saying slurs and nasty things, cut them down right then and there. Like, hey, where are you coming from? What's your problem, man? I had a wonderful word to begin to loosen it up too. I always said when somebody was nasty, I said, what bit you this morning? So it has to go really simultaneously. And you have to work hard at it. That's all I can say. Hard, hard, hard. Hope for the best. And we have to look at history. We have to take it seriously. It's amazing because I used to say too, I hope to God I will not see any more of this in my lifetime. I'm seeing it. But I hope that the shock of Oklahoma City, that as horrible, horrible, horrible it is, that it hopefully makes an impression somewhere. These guys are not kidding. They want to run their own country. Well, you got to fight back. And not to be intimidated, because even with the guns and all this hollering and all this nonsense, if you really listen to these guys, what they come up with is just total insanity. Just like Hitler, just like the brown shirts. There's no difference between them and the brown shirts. None. You got to take them seriously. I hope I haven't bored you to tears. work better to begin with.